Hi. Hello. Vector, you're going to Essen tomorrow. Jen is in Germany. She's going to bed. It's past her bedtime in Germany right now. She will be there tomorrow at the show. Stoked to start getting feedback from her on how it is. Jordan was there today. Looked like mayhem on the show floor. A very large show. How's everybody doing on this Thursday? Gosh, it's Thursday already? What the heck? What the absolute heck? Thursday? That's not fair. How'd it get to be Thursday? Not that I'm complaining. I really would like my weekend. To be dead honest with you. May come up here. I gotta set my computer up. Got a new laptop before I left on my last trip, and it's gonna become my office computer. May come do that this weekend. Today sucks, but could be worse. Found your challenge model, though. That's a great day. What are you talking about? Sorry to hear it's sucking for you. That always makes me sad. Bad days are bad. Hence the name. Like, duh. Bad days are bad. That's like the most what was the baseball commentator? Chicago White Sox, maybe. 2 hours it'll be all better. Iterator, what's going on? It's October, road cycling season pretty much over, and back to indoor training, says Chuck. Well, with that attitude, the roads are still there. The bikes are still there. Sounds like the only problem lies with you, buddy. Afraid of a little cold? A little rain? A little wet? I'm one to talk. I would not go outside anywhere near a bicycle in the winter. Game delay 3-day weekend. I just had lunch with a guy that was about to leave for his 3-day weekend. I'm sick of you 3-day weekend people. Keep your 3-day weekend to yourself. Some of us aren't as lucky. Jen's gallivanting around Germany, Dusseldorfen. I'm stuck here with Gabe and Christopher. You have to tell your wife to stop taking her bike to work when there's ice patches on the road. Why? That's not fun. It's like a video game, right? It just makes things more exciting. You gotta stay more in tune if there's ice, because it one one slip away from fatality makes life worth living. Sick leave, you develop a stutter due to exhaustion and work stress, so it's much less exciting than a normal vacation. Hey man, 3 days off is 3 days off. Can't Jason give everyone a 3-day weekend since he's in charge right now? So I can. Guess what the problem with that statement is? Big Bob says, so you want to go skydiving with me? Is that what you're saying? I don't really like the whole jumping out of planes thing. I get it. It just doesn't appeal to me. Not a bucket lister for me. I don't care. I'm perfectly fine inside the plane. But I also understand why people would do it. Just not a huge, never have been. Even as a young guy, was never something I was like, you know what would be cool? Going and diving out of an airplane for no reason. Trust me, I like extreme stuff, but the like the roller coaster thing, it's like over way too fast. But I get the exhilaration. If I jumped out of a plane, I would probably want to do it over and over again, is the thing. So there is that part. Just be thankful it's flying. Hey, the plane got in the air. The plane's doing fine. Let's not ruin things. I'm with you. Perfectly serviceable airplane. It's flying. Why do you feel the need to get to the ground quicker? Like you were literally just on the ground. The joy of flying is the whole fly part of it. I don't like these features on this model much, this armor inset panel stuff. It's a bad concept. It may be something that's fairly true to life. It is not fun to paint because they put this damn like a stitch, you know, like the piece of leather stitch that holds the plate onto the armor. I get that that's probably the way it was. So it might have a sense of realism for what it is, but it makes it not fun to paint. Sculptors, stop making models not fun to paint. Not everything has to have the, well, actually, that's there because that's the way it should be. Make it fun to paint. Flapjack, how would you paint something to look underwater? That's always a really tough one, right? The best way is the hardest, and the best way is to do it as if it were shallow water with light reflections coming from the ripples of the waves above you. So if you look at photographs, like if you Google underwater photography, you'll find some shallow water photography that would have exactly that. And so you'll get this kind of wavy, you know, line work on it, like shadows, that are in that wavy liquid pattern across the model. That would be where the light was being able to filter through from the top of the water. And of course, the waves and ripples in the water cause dark patterns that are swirly on the model, and you do that. And you have just the highlights on the top of the shoulder would be interrupted with these swirly dark spots that would give it the idea. But that has to translate to everything. The base, everything has to be that way and follow the pattern so that it gives you the feel of it. That's why I say it's the hardest one to do, because it literally is. You have to look at each piece and how it would be highlighted as part of the whole before it starts to make sense. I don't think it really translates well. So the easier answer is to just make sure that you have underwater style accoutrement on the base, You've got like seashells and fish, That's a lot easier to do, but it may not give you the, the look you're looking for. Because you can't like sculpt bubbles from respirators going up towards the surface very easy, right? I watched a movie last night on Netflix called Shot Caller. Anybody seen this? I have to admit, I watched it mainly because all over my YouTube feed were like outtakes from this prison movie called Shot Caller, and so I was interested in what it was all about. It had Jamie Lannister, the guy that played Jamie Lannister, as the main character. Anybody seen it? I understand it might not be a movie that interests a whole lot of people. It was very interesting as a movie. I understand what they were trying to do. I don't know that they did it as well as they wanted to, but it was an interesting concept. Yeah, it's a prison one. Happy-go-lucky financier, well-to-do financier guy gets a DWI manslaughter charge because he killed his best friend in a DWI wreck. They were all in the car together. And the best friend's wife, that was their best friend, sues him for, wrongful death and all that kind of stuff. And so he winds up behind bars for a specific time. The part where it lost me is that I don't think necessarily if you go to jail for, DWI, that you get to be a hardened criminal. That was kind of over the top fantasy. But who knows? They had a quip in there about once you're institutionalized, you're always instituted. I'm like, nah, that doesn't click with reality, but suspend that disbelief, and it was a pretty good flick. The message got lost in the sauce. That's a great way to put it. I feel like it felt like maybe there was a altruistic sense to the character that didn't really radiate through because of the way they had him react with his family and stuff. It was interesting. It had a lot of different nuances going on. Like one of them was like the I want to be the kingpin I could see that in there. But the other one was like, I don't want bad guys to get away with being bad. And it was just very strange. It was kind of all over the place. It was like it had a multiple personality disorder that it was having a hard time getting around. It couldn't figure out what it wanted to be when it grew up. You know, does that make sense for those of you that have seen it? Still, interesting flick. I would recommend watching it for those that enjoy that kind of stuff. It has some very violent parts, but it's not inherently like a just a silly violent action movie or anything. It's trying to tell a story. Of course, Jen left. So last night it was a dog and me, and the dog did not, with mom not home, the dog did not want to have me off the couch doing whatever I wanted to do. She wanted to be with dad. So I played good dad, and I sat on the couch with Cora for most of the night, watching some TV. That's always hard for me. Picking something that I actually want to watch is tough. I don't like TV much. So it was pretty good. Convoluted in the message. Yeah, Anakin. It was very convoluted in the message. Did I share my popcorn? I did not make popcorn. That would have been good. I don't know if we have popcorn at the house. Awkwardish. Nice. Nice. Yeah, it will continue to evolve. Cora has the sads. I don't know. She wasn't acting sad. She wasn't like moping around. She was still like energetic Cora. But you could tell she was a little off. She kept sitting on the couch and like looking over my shoulder. She leans right into me, right? And every now and then you'd see her lift her head and she'd look at the window where you can see the cars in the driveway and under the carport on our house. And she could tell that she was really weirded out because mom's car is there and dad's car is there, but mom's not there. Dad, what'd you do with mom? That was kind of the feeling I got. Like she was ready to call 911. 911, my dad is here, my mom is not. Dad is bad. She got a little sad when we went to bed because at the end of the night, she normally around let's call it like 8:30, 9 o'clock. She goes, and no matter where, like if I'm in my office, she's on the big. I have a big, massive love sack. I forget what it's called, 6-foot diameter beanbag chair, and she'll plop herself in the middle of the beanbag chair and kind of hang out with dad or fall asleep or whatever. But about 8:30, her biological clock goes off. She gets down. Mom will take her outside, and then she'll crawl up on the couch with mom, right in nuzzled in mom's hip, while mom watches bad television, and she hangs out with mom until it's time to go to bed, and then they go to bed. And last night, you could tell she was a little weirded out with that whole thing because she was in dad's room, and the body clock made her want to get up, and we took her out, and then when she came back in, she didn't know what to do because mom wasn't there, so she came back in with dad. So it was funny. Oh no, Wad, that sucks. Definitely hug your pets. The best love you'll ever get, and it has an expiration date on it that's much quicker than you'd like. Oh. Yeah, Jen only watches bad television. She admits it. She admits it readily. Jen is the bad television queen. That's not true. There's much worse television than what Jen watches, but Source, what's going on? Good to see you. Welcome, everybody. Hope your Thursday's going well. Anybody got big weekend plans that you would like to share? Anything fun going on? I have doggy duty, so we'll be going for rides. She likes her morning ride with dad, usually with mom too on the weekends, so we'll be doing that, of course. And then I don't know what we'll do. It's gotten awfully hot here again, so it's not like there's. It usually would be that time of the year where it'd be like, oh, we'll go for walks. It's freaking brutal hot still. Dragon Falls this weekend. Awesome. I never remember the dates for those shows. Dragonfall is Wisconsin, yeah? Am I right? I don't remember. Somewhere up in that Midwest area, right? Lake Geneva, yeah, correct. Correct. It's like really far off the beaten path, right? It's a neat little place, but it makes it really difficult for me to plan to go there because I'm like, how do you get to it, right? If you're not in the area and driving, it's hard to like get your plane schedule figured out because it's like out in the middle of nowhere from the airport. I wish all of the armor plates were more pronounced like this uh, tabard section as opposed to these little bitty things on the side. Not a fan as I dig into more of the painting of it. Sorry, I keep getting off screen, huh? Not doing my job. Kind of far out of the way, yeah, unless you're localish. Yeah, exactly. Or can like carpool with a group or something like that. They asked me out there last year, and I was like, it's gonna be really difficult for me time wise. And then when I looked at it, I was like, oh, that'd be difficult just to get there. But I really want to go one year. It would be again a really fun one to just go as an attendee and hang out with everybody. I enjoy that so much. No, that's one of the reasons I love Nova Open so much is that even though we're a big sponsor for Nova Open, it really feels like I get to hang out as an attendee there because I'm not inundated with meetings and such. And I love that. I love shows where I get to have really cool meetings with really cool people and do business, but it makes me kind of lose the feel of the convention from a hobby loving standpoint, you know? And Jen and I both still love to be the people, right? I just want to go and be an attendee and experience the hobby from the fun side. Jen in Spiel right now is going to be overwhelmed. I hope she has a great time. She's got a big meeting tomorrow, and then she gets to just kind of let her hair down and hang out and see and take it all in. And we're trying to get an understanding of how we can do better in the EU and have a what kind of presence we can do there. And tough because we're not there, we're here, but we would love to be able to have more interaction with people on that side of the world. Big Bob. It's great. Again, it this year actually at Nova felt a lot like work because I was doing Age of Angra game demos the entire time. Right, I had a blast, but holy hell, I we didn't plan the or I guess we didn't think that it was going to be such an intense reception to the game. We had so many people stop in and play, and that was great. But I would show up at 10 in the morning at open, and then until it was time to go, I'd be playing Angra. Aqua just came and played with us. Big Bob came and heckled us. Brought us treats. I had one slice of pie and one, maybe two. I think I had two glasses of chocolate milk. Jordan and Christopher did the rest of the damage with that stuff so that nobody can be mad at me for not sharing the love. Made fun of all the time. Bringing food and presents at Adepticon. What? You got more pie filling filled from this year's harvest? Holy cow. Or vacuum sealed, ready to go for the future. That was so good. It was just perfect because I'm not, like, I love baked desserts, but I'm not a huge fan of overly sweet stuff. So it's weird sometimes because I don't want stuff that's just icky sweet. And so many times pie is icky sweet. Like, so many people overdo the sugar in pie. And so for me, having a pie that is nice and tart apple, the way it should be, the crust isn't overly sugary and all that kind of stuff is perfect. It was great. Got a little cross reflection there because there's not much to deal with or work with on these little plates, so I gotta kind of make it up as I go. I'm just gonna do a little bit of a cross shine from the maybe from the reflection of the little fabric piece up above or something like that. At 100 months, do we get a new icon? No. No. You've said you would protest for about 100 months now. Yes. We have talked about for years now, like reevaluating all the icons and emotes and all that stuff on Twitch, and we never do it, right? We are the hardest working, lazy Twitch streamers on the planet, I want to say. Should go get a Granny Smith. Just one. One apple does not a pie make. You just want an apple. Every now and then, like I grew up and my great grandmother used to do apple with a slice of cheddar cheese, sharp cheddar cheese, and I thought she was nuts. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, that's really, really good. And so now I can't do an apple on its own without a little sharp cheddar cheese. I don't know what it is. The saltiness of the cheese, the tart sweet of the apple. It's just perfect. She was not nuts. She was not nuts. I thought she was nuts. Well, she was not. My grandmother was nuts. My grandmother, my great grandmother, my whole family is nuts. But whose isn't? But she was not nuts for the wonderful cheese and apple experience that I have since adopted for myself. Cheese Castle at the way up to Adepticon and bring everyone snacks. Like, what is at Cheese Castle? Because this has me intrigued. I am a fine purveyor of the cheese. Or not purveyor. I am a, I don't sell cheese. I would never be able to own a cheese shop. I would definitely be getting high on my own supply if I owned a cheese shop. How squeaky the cheese gets. Squeaky cheese. That's what you got to make cheese curds out of. Squeaky cheese. It like uh, sounds like you're eating a small mouse when you bite down on it. Very waxy, I guess, without that sounding gross. People who know what I'm talking about. I don't have to explain myself. Connoisseur. It's a rough word, man. a cheese connoisseur. That's what I needed. That's the word I needed, though. You helped me out. Now it's in my head. It is not a word that is friendly to spell. And you can't even blame the English language for that one. That, I believe, is those silly French people. Cheese Castle looks huge. Oh my god, I need to go. Your car, Wad. That's serious. That's take your hat off and stare into my eyes. Serious, Wad. You should get that looked at. Besides spray paint, what else are we releasing? God, that's not enough. That's not enough? I felt like that was enough for this time around. I will release this piece of paper. Let's see, what's next after the spray primers? The spray paints, then we have brush on primer, matte varnish, on airbrush matte varnish, and then heavy bodied acrylics. I got 16 heavy body acrylics coming. Age of Anger minis are coming. Yep, the 3 Age of Anger minis you've seen us paint, those are coming. We just got to figure out packaging. We got to figure out packaging that works for all the Age of Anger minis. I want to do it once and be done, so we got to figure that out, but that's shouldn't be that big of a deal. So we have a lot. Laundry detergent. Monument Hobbies laundry detergent with heavy pigment. We're known for our pigment. Might not be the best sales pitch for laundry detergent. I think people might be a little leery of the company that does paint getting into the clean my clothes segment. Squidmar signature primer win? Never. Never. Have we ever considered artist grade food coloring? Coconut cheese, heavy body acrylics. Yeah, we have tested them out on stream. We've shown everybody during the process of evaluation and getting our formula correct, and this is the outcome of that. Very nice, matte finished, heavy bodied acrylics. I think people will love them. They're very, very good. Very, very nice. Fun to play with. A little bit longer open time. They are still acrylic, so you can use our glazed wash medium with them, but they are, more translucent. We don't make them for opacity. They are very, very good fine art paints. They will knock your socks off if you're used to heavy-bodied acrylics at Winsor Newton or the best Liquitex or whomever you're using. Schminky, we will knock their socks off. It's amazing. Yeah, and it's not really even a signature set. It's just a collated version of colors that they already make. So, wasn't really impressed with that. You know? The way it went when we talked to Emil and Lucas, they're both very good painters, right? But they have been painting a particular way with a particular product for so long and are not really in the mindset of changing their ways. And our paint requires you to change your ways. You have to stop being a hobby painter and be an artist with an artist paint mindset with Pro Acryl if you're that dug in. And they're very dug in. You can tell. We respect what they do, though. Think of the video that title, is this the primer that puts GW out of business? That's not going to happen. We like GW. None of us want GW to go out of business. Trust me. The industry would not be as good without Games Workshop in it. The same way we need them, they need us. So it's a very good deal. When are we planning on releasing the heavy bodies? I'm hoping before end of year, but it might be like it's our January release. And then we have a very big March release. So that's planned. Nothing's in stone. Things can go awry between now and then, but we have a very big March release planned at Adepticon that should be awesome. I think everybody's going to be super excited for that. And then the January release, like right after Christmas, might be a great time for us to bounce the heavy bodies out. They're neat. They're a game changer for people that use that product. They're not a game changer for hobby in general necessarily. I'd like to think so. I think they're great to work into your repertoire, but we're making them specifically to appeal to those people who come from that artistic background that want a paint that is built for painting on three-dimensional surfaces, but gives the benefit that heavy bodies really do, which Procryl already does, but some people just have a hard time letting go of paste acrylics. They know how to work with paste acrylics. They know how to add mediums into them and things like that. So it's going to be fun. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of experience out of them for sure. Bloodwaller says, I've been roped into going to Cheese Castle several times, not to be a buzzkill, but it's a tourist trap, overpriced everything, skip it. It's like that big chocolate candy place, or the big candy place on the way through Missouri or whatever it is, right? Like the fudge, I forget what it's called. It's a really disturbing name. It's a really disturbing name. It's but yeah, it's not the Fudge Factory, but it's something like that. And you walk in there and it has some neat stuff, but it's not. Like I went through that place, whatever it is. I think it's in Missouri, and it's a huge candy and fudge place. It's enormous. And it has a lot of neat stuff if you're into candy, but I really in that realm only like dark chocolate, and they only had like a few things that were dark chocolate. It was like dark chocolate covered cashews or something that I got that were really good, but it was not a lot of selection, so it was paste acrylics, not past acrylics. Guessing Age of Augur minis are resin, just like with the Texture Trainer ones. Yeah, same thing. Same thing you've seen us playing around with. We do not print those in-house. We have a third-party facility that's been 3D printing those. They come in multiple parts. You put them together. We're going through QC on all of that. We have them all in-house. We have hundreds of them in-house. We're just got to go QC them and then package them, and then they'll be on the site. So, Tempera paint? No. No. Kurt? No, we won't make enamels. No. If you like the idea of streaking grime, our noosh with any of our colors is that, but it's a non-toxic, non-enamel type thing. So we won't. Other than the spray paints, and the reason the spray paints can be a part of our repertoire is that we don't can them here. We don't want to be involved in the highly toxic nature of that. I don't want my people exposed to the way you have to make enamels. Relentless Monogram says you can get cheap viewers, which we don't need cheap viewers, so that's not a thing. That's the quickest way to get a lifetime ban. Yeah, I'm trying. I'm flying solo today, so it's hard for me to I don't have the program open. Paint Liquor, you are definitely a cheap viewer. You're a cheap date. I don't know. We have a huge building facility here and a ton of broadcast equipment. So I don't know if any of you are actually cheap viewers. It cost us quite a bit here, right? You guys cost us quite a bit. Ban. See ya, Relentless Monogram. Later. Hopefully I got the right person. I think I got the right person, right? What is harder to paint, small miniatures or big dioramas? Asked Kruger. I guess that's kind of like how long is a piece of string. The big diorama could be really a pain if it had a ton of detail in a larger space just for time and effort. Anytime you get more items that you have to put together to tell a story, I feel like that is can be more difficult just in terms of scale, right? So if I paint a tank, that has its challenges, and you paint the tank. If I then want to put the tank in a diorama with an exploded building and dudes running around it and fallen power lines, that's become exponentially harder because now the work I do on the tank has to fit inside the story of the surrounding environment, and I have to build up the surrounding environment and tell its own story without the tank in it. So it just becomes more moving parts. And so I tend to think that you up the scale of difficulty as you add more parts to the storytelling experience. So dioramas tend in my head to be more, but if you're painting a very, very high quality display piece for like Monte Sansevino or some big exclusive painting competition, it's arguable that that could be even more difficult, right? Because if you're painting it with the mindset of, oh my gosh, I have to outdo every other painter on the planet, then that has its own nuances of difficulty that go along with it. So I think it really is just your end goal. He wouldn't stop monogramming me. It was relentless. Jason telling us he doesn't want us around when we're the kind of viewers who spend dozens of hours at the off chance of a $20 gift card. What? When have I ever said I don't want you around? I've just said you're very hard to hang out with, Game Delay, and that was for you in particular. The source does this. I'm precious. You are all invaluable. Invaluable. Your mom's told us so. I wonder why most other tabletop games or miniature makers mostly use resin. How expensive is the cost to use whatever the plastic the modern GW minis are made from? Asked Derpstick. Great question. The way that miniature manufacturing goes is that resin is a higher cost material, lower cost production method. So it scales to where you can do smaller quantities at much more value. But it also has an economy of scale that doesn't work until you start making a lot of them. Like everything, you make a lot more volume equals more value per piece. Resin can be done in small volume, so you'll see a lot of garage manufacturers obviously using resin. Companies that don't do high volumes of miniatures, either because they're just small or they only release limited quantities. Resin fits that because you don't have to spend the upfront cost. The tooling behind making injection molded plastics, right? So what we would call high impact polystyrene or HIPS, is based around a metal machined mold that has to have a good clamping force because you're putting a tremendous amount of pressure into it to put liquid plastic into it and have that plastic go to all of the crevices in the mold to make the miniature. So that's done under very high pressure. So the mold has to be very high density, and they do it out of metal. And so they'll machine those molds, and the machining of those molds and getting it precise and testing and all that is 10 to 20,000 for a mold that does about a sprue size mold. So, generally I would say about $10 to $15,000 upfront cost to the manufacturer. So if we wanted to make a miniature on sprue, which we're talking about doing, it's 15 grand. You just spend that money and you hope the sprue works. And if you have the model you can think about this. If you're doing metal molds, you have to make sure the model and the master that you make the mold from and all of that is damn near perfect, because you can't adjust the mold easily. You can take more material out of the mold. So if you wanted to add an extra part on a model, like a shoulder pad, you could probably make that work. It just depends. But you can't take and put metal back into the mold. And so you got to get it spot on. Right. And so from that perspective, it makes it to where it's kind of a one and done. So it's just beyond the affordability for a lot of smaller companies to do that at scale. Because you can imagine if I have a game that even is a skirmish game and has maybe the 2-player box set comes with 20 miniatures, 10 on a side, and those 20 miniatures take 5 sprues to make, right? One team is 4 models of sprue, or a couple models on a sprue, and the other team is the same. And so you have 4 or 5 sprues that you have to make. and they're $15,000 each for the mold. So now you're in scaling of like $60,000 to $75,000 range just to pay for the molds. And then the material to run them is fairly cheap, but you need to run a lot of them to get your value back. Otherwise, the miniatures cost a fortune, right? I mean, let's be honest. It costs GW for the small character sprues. You know, they come like the sprue size is roughly about 9 or 8 by 10 or something like that. It's probably not that big. I think it may be like 6 by 9, right? Is like a pretty typical box sprue set like you'd find in Space Marines and all that. And they may run them on bigger ones that they then break in half, right, to save for the mold. The mold would be more expensive. But then they'll break the sprues apart and pack them together. You've seen that in GW models forever. Well, if you look at like the character models that come on a quarter size sprue, so there's 4 of those sprues in a mold for your character. If it's a 1 sprue deal, like a Kroot Shaper, you know, comes in that little blister pack or box and has 1 sprue and a base. And so that sprue probably costs GW to manufacture after the mold cost. Probably costs them that 1 sprue. I'm going to go out on a limb and say 30 cents, maybe, for that 1 sprue for that commander. It may be a little cheaper on scale, depending on how much they're running. But they still have to make up the cost of that mold, right? And so that's where a lot of you'll see on Reddit, everybody like, it only takes 5 cents to make a Space Marine. True, but it takes a lot of investment to make the molds for all of the Space Marines they just released. And if you think about how many sprues they release when a new army comes out, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars that it takes just to make those molds. And you got to make up all that cost. So not defending the price of models, but it's an expensive proposition to get into. You have to be like, okay, is my game or is this model going to sell thousands or is it going to sell hundreds? If it's going to sell hundreds, you make it out of resin. If it's going to sell thousands, then you start looking into injection molded plastics. Is usually the mindset. Unless you're rich. They can do whatever. Rich people do whatever they want. Automaton says, I'm watching you on a 2015 iPad. I'm a cheap viewer. Well, that wasn't how that was meant to... It was more of a... it was the cost of acquisition that we were talking about. Kruger asks, what's the longest painting you've ever done in your life? The longest amount of like miniature painting, like it took to do a miniature? Oh, God. People in chat are laughing. Hundreds and hundreds of hours, right? I don't keep track, but long time, definitely. Game Delay says, I said we don't want cheap viewers. I don't want his cheap viewers. You cheap viewers, you're good. I have fired you a lot of times, Pop Chicken, that's true. I fired Jordan more than I fired chat, though, so you got that going for you. That'll be up and on your coming up on your next review. Aren't the molds super expensive? Yes. Yeah, well, I thought everybody was shirking their work responsibilities. I had more respect for you than just sitting around for a gift card. It's crazy how far pewter minis have come recently. New Ironwind Battletech models have been great. Yep. Yeah, spun white metal minis are good. That technology just has problems with the mold shifting and the problems that you get with mold lines and cleanup. Metal minis are just hard to clean. They're not good for new hobbyists in this day and age. Plastic and resin are much better. CeoCast, even though I'm not a fan of the final product at the level that I'm trying to produce minis necessarily, it is a great way to make starter minis. But then if you look at it like that, then PVC is a great way to do that. PVC is cheaper on the molds in some cases than hard plastics. So it kind of is an in-between, but it's still on the pricey side. You see a lot of Kickstarters that promise, molded plastic or PVC injection models that don't deliver because the price is still high. This is a Warcrow. Yeah, Dano. You're not a cheap. Derp says, shame it's expensive because I've heard resin is less safe to work with when you're cleaning them up, prepping them for building and painting them. That's why I've stuck to GW minis so far. So let's be, well, I'm not a medical professional, so obviously your individual situation is different, but any particulate that you breathe into your lungs is dangerous or has the potential to be dangerous. You don't want to breathe solids. So resin, by its very nature in most cases, when you sand it or tool work it, you file it, it gets to be a much finer dust that those particulates spread in the air much easier than like plastic doesn't turn to dust when you scrape it. It turns into little chips that fall, right? So resin is more dangerous, not because of any kind of toxicity native to the resin. It's all toxic, right? You don't eat plastic, but you can breathe it, and that can cause you big problems. Yeah, so it becomes airborne much easier, definitely. But it's not like working with it; it's gonna, kill you or anything. How long can you use the mold until it starts to wear your arts, Tony? It depends on the material the mold's made out of, but tons and tons, and thousands and millions of sprues. Like the lifespan of molds is pretty long. I wish Mo was here. Mo has done that for a lot of his life, so if Mo ever comes in, you can ask him. Right. Resin molds deform over time because they're done out of silicone in most cases, and that will deform due to the heat. So a resin mold, when doing a resin miniature, will last for maybe 150 or so runs on the top end, and then you have to redo the master and all that. So there's a lot of personal time or personnel time in making the molds over and over and over again. The plastic molds will eventually wear because of the clamping them together and putting them under pressure. Eventually the spots where they clamp together, that they have the detents where the pin goes in to keep it from shifting, those will wallow out, and that's when you start seeing mold lines, or it's mold line, right? Because the mold pieces go together, and if they don't fit super tight, then the plastic, which is injected under high pressure, squeezes out around the edges, and that's what a mold line is formed from. So poor mold making can cause mold lines from the beginning, and wear and tear on it can cause that. So generally you start seeing the molds not fit, they start to slip, and then the pieces are a little distorted, and that's when you redo the mold. But the nice thing with that is that the mold is quick to make, because nowadays it's a CNC program, and you just plug it in the machine, you make another one. It's just expensive because machine time is expensive, right? If we could find a way to make metal machine time on a CNC less expensive, then you would make injection molded plastics considerably more affordable. The Cyocast stuff that is, like I had him up here. This guy is Cyocast, right, that we made. This is for a game that we're developing. And, so when we were making these guys for testing, we had the sculpts for the first two factions all sent off to be Cyocast. Well, I think like 3 or 4 of each of the models in each faction sent off to be Cyocast. And we got them back, and it's just a little rough because the shrinkage of the pieces, especially as they get bigger like this, is about as big as you could do in few pieces, because like his whole torso is pretty thick and bulky. So you wind up in a situation where you can't do a piece that's too big in any dimension, and you can't apply a lot of pressure to the vulcanized rubber mold, right? It's only like 90 psi tops or something like that, and so the metal molds are tremendous amounts more pressure than that as they push it through. So you have to think about the viscosity of the material. Like resin, when it gets heated up and melted down, can be a lot thinner, more watery than plastic. But that's also why it's more brittle generally when it cures. So, bold of them to assume I ever finish a mini. Correct. How dare you think I finish miniatures? What do you think this is, a professional place? I make paint. Is it true that matte varnish can be used instead of a primer, Kruger? The spray matte varnish that we're coming out with can be, yeah, sure. We showed off that here's a model that we hit with just the matte varnish, and we just started painting over it. We used very thin paint too to show you that it wouldn't beat up. That's just one coat of paint on there. So yeah, it gives enough tooth that you could paint over it. And I think this is exciting for, like somebody mentioned, like clear plastic parts on models, and I think that'd be great, because this is how the resin on our texture trainers start out, right? And with the matte varnish over it, that's what it is. Isn't that crazy? So not only does it matte it way down, take away all the shine, but yeah, it gives a tremendous amount of tooth so that you can, paint directly on the matte varnish. The fact that it has any kind of colorant to it is irrelevant as far as a primer goes, other than giving you a base color to work from. In honesty, in like the automotive space, the reason why the primer has a color is so that you can tell where you've painted and where you haven't, right? I don't know that the primer necessarily of any color makes any difference, There are pigments and ways to make a primer that will give it more tooth because of the pigment that's used and things like that. So like red oxide was used for priming like tanks in World War II because it gave it more tooth and lasted longer. But yeah, you can use the matte varnish that way. You prefer them to bones. Bones is a weird thing. It's like a PVC. They'd have to tell me. I think it's a PVC, right? Air is dangerous. We breathe death every day. Also true. But your nose hairs filter that out. So never breathe anything your nose hairs can't filter out. That's the cardinal rule. Oh, there's microplastics in everything. That's the big buzzword nowadays, right? Oh yeah, wood particulates are horrible. They're generally big enough that your nose hairs catch those though. You get like wood chip boogers. Kruger says, "What method are using for painting realistic human skin?" I mean, there's a million of them, right? So you just determine what you want to, how much time you want to spend, how realistic do you want to have it look, right? Because you can do, I mean, this has got all sorts of crazy colorant going on it, but you can, basically just use skin tones. And I underpainted with like greens and purples and reds to get more realism on it, and that was pretty quick, right? Underpainting is a skill that I teach a lot of times, and while I probably don't have a final model up here that's good to show you, we have a really great video on underpainting for flesh that has me painting a Wonder Woman bust that's up on our YouTube channel. You should watch that. It uses a lot of greens and yellow greens and reds and blues and purples as a way to paint the model skin area first, so that you're basically creating the color for the tissue types that are underneath the skin, because skin is translucent. So skin, when we say skin has a color, it does, right? But it's also see-through. And so what you're seeing a lot of times when you look at skin is you're seeing the coloring of veins, arteries, or blood capillaries and things like that. So you get the pinkishness of blood, you get the yellowishness of fatty cells, right? So you get all these other colors that are not the skin. It's what's under the skin, right? Skin's not pink, right? It's the blood under the skin that is pink. And in the areas where you have more, feeling, more nerve areas, more blood vessels, because you need more oxygen serving that area and all that. So, you get, squeeze it tight, you get more blood under the skin, but let go and that goes away. So you're trying to reproduce all those colors. So what are those colors? Determine that. Dark magentas, greens and yellow greens I like for representing the fatty cells, blues and purples for like the vein portion of it, and reds for the arteries. And so it's highly oxygenated blood is going to be very red. So you work in that sense, and that's, in my opinion, the best way to achieve realistic skin. You can do the same thing by painting and layering color up, but remember, all that stuff is underneath the skin. It's not on top. So when you go back and you glaze in like purple on top of your skin tones, it will feel like it's sitting on top of your skin tones from a visual perspective, because the pigment's laying on top. It's physical. So that's just something you got to take into account. That's why you just don't breathe, Papa Chicken. Teach me that one. How long is a piece of skin? You're going to make a joke about Jason's painting being out of frame, but then someone asks a question and ruins your definitely funny joke. Yeah, it was definitely funny. Yeah, yellowness of bad liver too, Wad. You got to be careful which one it is. Fat cells are easier to deal with than the liver problem. Yeah, underpainting flesh on the one. Oh, good, Anakin got the link in there. That's the one for underpainting flesh on the Wonder Woman bust. Yeah. But then there's stuff like I'll do like this that's literally just skin tones built up on the model quickly, and then I glaze shadow back on him. But this model started with me airbrushing all of the greenish browns on him first, so those greenish browns were already on the skin areas, and then I just glazed the skin tones back over that to give it some cool coloring that way, right? So I enjoy making sure that all of the skin layers have got some type of color underneath them before I start building up like Caucasian skin tones or browns of any type or whatever, whether it's magenta or whatever. I even do it like when we painted Hulk. Right? If you remember, Hulk started with like Payne's gray and magenta wash over the top of the green and purples, and you can see like the Payne's gray blue shadows, right? I like a lot of depth on my models that's created with that variation in color. And so we painted him in greens, and then we did a magenta, a dark magenta wash, or maybe it was the bright heart, the dark hot pink, and that's what gives you the feel of like the the veins popping out and gives us some pinkishness and makes him look more alive than just painting green Hulk. So even when doing like alien skin, it still benefits you to think about what's underneath that skin. Rhinos and elephants, their skin's opaque, like it's heavy armor style skin. So if you're painting something like that, which you could argue that Hulk is green because you're not going to puncture Hulk's skin, but I like to think of it as I like to be able to see that things are living, and that if you were to cut them, they have a color that comes out. It's not just green bodysuit. So Patrick Laughlin, he's angry because someone stole his tutu. Yes. Believe it or not, I think the tutu finally left. I kept trying to get it out of my studio, and I think it finally made its way out to someplace else. Thank God. You're going to paint the Predator, okay? What color should you pick for his skin? Looks very complex. I feel like the Predator was kind of pale, right? Am I right, chat? I feel like the Predator is very pale skinned. Almost like dead skin, right? More almost like a translucent whitish. We did this guy here recently, and I really like that skin tone. This is, again, a lot of greens and blue shadows, and then working up very pale skin tones over the top, right? So something like that works. This may be more green than you want your Predator. He's probably a little bit more gray that I would use, but, this type of coloring would work really well. Right? You can definitely get more feel of green in like the hands and stuff like that, but I don't know what they've done with Predator I haven't seen like the most recent ones. I'm thinking of the Schwarzenegger Predator. I feel like he was fairly pale, right? But it would be more gray than green, right? But same kind of like I would see myself painting this and then going a layer of almost like not bright neutral gray, but like maybe red gray over the top of this. Something that would, dilute it down and get rid of some of the green again. But the green, I think, would be really good for that feel of tissue underneath the skin type situation, This would be a good one for everybody to copy for your Undeath painting challenge this month, by the way. Trying to think of what else. This was a lot of olive flesh over the top of jades, right? Again, probably more green than you want, but it shows you can go to pale flesh, and again, working up off of, I think, my Payne's Gray into jade, and then using a lot of the turquoise and olive flesh mixed together, and then finally finishing out with olive flesh for that top level pale type highlight. That works pretty well. Again, all skin is painted exactly the same. When I say that, it's all because everything we paint is exactly the same. You start with a shade, a mid-tone, a base layer, highlights, and all that. It's just how much of that color do you want to see. Having the shadows be visible more will make it darker. Having the highlights be visible more will make it lighter. Just pick how you want your final flesh tone to turn out. Pick those colors. Go for broke. I don't think I have anything else that's really in that scope. I have a bunch of general Caucasian-y flesh things. Pinky flesh troll. Right. I don't think, that again is a neat workup, but it is more, pinky flesh than like that alien pale. That works pretty well. I'm a fan of paint it how you want it to look, and if you want it to look like the way it did in the movie, then getting that hue right is important. I very rarely paint anything like the box art. I'm not a box art guy. I don't really care. I paint it the way I see it in my mind's eye. That's why you don't see me paint a lot of Spider-Man and that kind of stuff. Although I do love the Marvel chibi guys. Those are fun. Kruger, colors are blended perfectly. They will blend perfectly. I don't always blend very well. But thank you. But thank you. Alien is just straight black with gloss varnish. That works for the Alien for sure, right? A little bit of like purple shadow is always cool, or blue shadow on that black is neat to give it some depth. But yeah, the Alien is pretty straightforward, right? It's just slimy, shiny, black carapace kind of stuff. You want to copy the huge Flesh Eater Quartz model you did for October? That would be a great flesh tone. Phil has that one in his office. That was Phil's model. So Phil has the whatever his name is guy. I like doing stuff that's more. I like doing like what appears to be kind of like humany skin tones. This has a lot of green in it. You can see I like a lot of green in my flesh tones when it's monsters, right? Because it feels not well, which gives me that uncanny valley for monsters that we do, right? So this has a lot of yellow green underneath, and then the flesh on top of that. And you let the yellow green peek through on purpose, right? You don't cover it like in the places where the muscle groups come together. That way you're left with a sickly feel on a guy like this, and it kind of works. And like I said, I really enjoy doing things that make you look at it and think you recognize what it is, and then you draw back and go, ooh, gross. Because you get to tell a story better that way. So if I were going to paint the Predator, I would do something like that. I would give it a little bit more green and purple undertone and then paint it like human flesh tone. So it looked like it's kind of one of us, but not really. As opposed to that kind of like fish skin that they gave it, which is more like almost like translucent, gray-white. All right. Think I should probably do the gold base coats on the shoulder plate to give me an idea of what's going on there. When painting in general, I like to move around the model considerably. I don't like focusing on one part till it's done. I feel like that's a bad strategy, especially the newer of a painter you are, to get too hyper focused on any one part of the model. Now, if there's a part of the model that you're really struggling with and you need to hyper focus to get it done, it's your first time doing non-metallic metal, it's your first time doing flesh tones like we're talking about or whatever, then the focus is worthy. But in most cases, once you get to a comfort level and you're just like, okay, I'm just picking the next color and going to the next part, make sure that you try to paint all the parts of the model to kind of a 50 to 60% done rate, and then bring the whole model to closure at the same time, or close together, if that makes sense. That way you won't get out of control and struggle like a lot of people do with, making one part of the model. You get it to where it's like, oh my God, I got the boots look perfect. And they look great, but then it limits how you can paint the rest of the model because maybe you made them too bright, right? Or they're too dark, and when you start painting the bright flesh or metal around the boots, then the boots, don't look as good as they did. So save yourself the hassle of the do and redo part of painting, and only work things up to a particular comfort level, and then move on to another thing that's close by, so that you can see, like in this case, how is this metal that I'm doing going to look up against all the gold in all the situations on the model. Because you can make poor decisions based on brightness. It's usually value that's going to get you in trouble. You'll highlight a particular single piece of the model to a point where you really love it, but you haven't taken into account the fact that it's right next to something that's supposed to be white. And now when you paint that other thing white, the brightness on the area you did is not working. Doesn't look right. Or worse yet, next to an area that's black, and the brightness you just painted is now way too bright when you paint the black hair. You got the skin done perfectly. You love it. It's all great. And then you put black hair next to that same skin, and all of a sudden the skin looks super pale. Because, every color you put on a model will affect every other color next to it. And so build those colors up in tandem like I'm doing now, before you finish any one part, and you'll have a lot better success on picking the right direction to go. Do I need to make it brighter? Do I need to darken things down? What's my next color choice? All of that will feel a lot more natural to you as you get used to it. I'm yanking him up off of here. Also, remember to work from the inside out. The whole reason I stopped painting gold to go back to the metal on the shoulder plates like this before I did the gold on the shoulder plates is because it's underneath it, right? You want to make sure that you're being friendly to yourself and not making yourself go and paint the underarm after you painted everything around it. And it's like playing that game Operation where you're trying not to make the nose light up and buzz at you. What the sword on this guy should be made out of? You're thinking marble or granite? Really? Wow. It has a stone vibe to it because of the rune carved into the base, but I think this is not blade. This is, where the pommel guard would be or the hand guard would be. So I don't really know. What I want to do with it. I generally go to gold and silver blade. I'm not trying to get too crazy with this guy. This is meant to just be an easy palette cleanser model. Something fun where I don't have to think too hard. Did I get all the... There's no real swirly, gribbly bits on this guy, is there? Oh, yeah, there are more. Derpstick, this is burnt sienna. So it's a very orangey, dark brown. Right? I love it for any time I'm doing warmer gold. It's also a great rust color, just straight out of the bottle. It with like orange oxide are tremendous. Then I'm going to go over the top of it with Nova Orange. That's how I did this other gold. You'll notice that the burnt sienna gives me a really good dark recess, shadow, and reflection that keeps some warmth to the gold, but moves it away from being like, fake 24 karat gold. It puts it more in that space. But you'll notice I only use yellow ochre. I don't use a real yellow in any of this. And typically I like my golds to be based with greens, which you see a lot in all of the work that I do. Because that gives you a more natural feeling gold, and it lets you use the warmer gold tones for things like brass, which is really the way that would be. Brass is a very warm orangey gold. Gold is more green. Gold tarnishes to black. So yellow ochre is real yellow. Hey, not around here, buddy. Like Jordan would pull out like warm yellow. And I don't use a lot of the yellows and warm yellows and transparent yellows on my gold. I might go back and spot in some yellow along the way, but it's not something that I typically use a whole lot of. First layer when I'm doing the color over the base on non-metallic metal is usually very thin. Pretty typical of me if you watch my style. I'll use a lot of thin coats to start to build up my color where I want it. It means that it won't overtake my burnt sienna too badly. Lets me play around a little bit more confidently with where I'm thinking about putting my light and my shine. I can still visualize it even though it's not pumping a lot of contrast out right now. It's still letting me see how I build up brightness and how to make this thing work. Paint liquor, yeah, it's just too easy, right? I love doing gold with purple undertones. I rarely use blue because I feel like blue in my head is kind of reserved for white metal, steel, and things like that. But you can do blue. I really like purple and magenta underneath golds. Works really, really well. It's just not on this model. This model, because of how cool and blue I took the skin, was really the driving factor on figuring out how warm to make the gold. You know, it's usually that's how that works. Is for me, picking color temperature depends on where the primary temperature of the model is. You know, when doing the Blood Angels, right? Well, if the primary color is red for Blood Angels, which it is, then what can you do to cool the red off? So that's why we use the Payne's Gray shadows and plum in those areas so that we didn't have just a bright red model. That helps bring the whole picture together better and let your model have a lot more depth. What I'm doing right now would be a great workup for leather if you didn't go to yellow after this. If you went into like a adding in something like olive flesh to the orange, then you could make this be a really cool looking leather. You wouldn't want to move it to orange probably, depending on if you wanted it to be like, you know, painted lacquered leather or something, you could, but in most cases I would leave it more browns. Damascus steel doesn't really turn out at small scale, right? You really want to be able to pull the you know, the texture of Damascus blade and folding out, and at small scale it's really hard to do that. You could do it, but the time it takes is not worth the profit on the backside, I don't think. Derpstick says, what do you prefer, true metallic or non-metallic? I'm a non-metallic guy, right? I come from a world where I want the model to... So let me back up. What we're doing as model painters is we are painting a three-dimensional photograph. This is a photograph of this bear in one instant of time. It doesn't move. It doesn't change. It's always in this pose. And so it's a photograph. Three-dimensional photograph is what miniatures are. And so when we're painting them, we want to think about setting up the story of the miniature and the environment they're on as a three-dimensional photograph. It shouldn't change. The problem with reflective paints, metallics, color change paints, things like that, is that as you move the model around, the color changes. The reflection changes. If I were to paint this guy, like if I'm painting a Space Marine and I'm painting him silver, like a Gray Knight, and I paint it with metallics, then if I turn the model upside down, I don't get what I get here. Here I get some really cool shadows that add some neat coloring to the model. On that model, it would be shiny because the light would be reflecting off of it, so it loses the picture, right? Here, everything I do, every shine on that non-metallic is exactly where it should be no matter how I turn the model, right? And it gives that neat depth and perspective that I wanted it to, no matter what. You can take this model and look around and really view for the hard work you put into it. For me, that's the most important thing. For metallics are great. We make great metallics, and when you use them, you're going for that feel like I'm really trying to show people this is metallic really quick. But I wind up spending as much time on metallic paint as I do on non-metallic paint. We just did something recently, didn't we, guys? I feel like I just used metallic paint on something where we kind of went hard in the paint. Oh, not necessarily hard, but we did this guy, right? And did all metallics here. And so the time it takes to darken the metallic in a way so that when I turn, the metallics upside down, they're still dark. They don't get super bright. And then when I look at it from the top, I get that brightness and that shine. The time it takes to do that, I could have painted it non-metallic, right? But like on War Machine models, because of all the metal and the kind of steam punkishness, I really like the metallics on these models. So, when I paint War Machine, probably most of the time you would find me doing metallics, just because it has a neat feel on the model. But I have to spend a lot of time to make sure that as I look at the model, the shine of the model doesn't change too drastically as I move it around. Otherwise, it messes up my whole paint scheme. It would make the highlights on everything else look weird if, when you turn it, the bright spots move around the model all over the place. So I say photograph as in slice of life photograph. So yeah. Derp stick leather looks great. Is it just burnt sienna and orange? Which? What are we talking about? On the shoulder here, this is metal. This is the gold. This is the same gold as this, right? So it will look like these things here in a bit. Well, maybe not today, but it will be this. This is how I painted all of these. You can see little bits of those colors in the shadows mainly, where you still have the burnt sienna and the Nova orange that show through. But yeah, look, this would make a good leather. Literally, you go over this with a little bit of olive flesh along the edges and some scratches, and you'd be perfect leather. A lot of sneezing going on out there. Again, somebody's like sneezing like a mad person. And on this stage, I pretty much do really rough feathered blending. I'm not looking for smoothness, but I do want it to blend a little bit because I never know what's going to show out when I get to the next color. But it's not for smoothness right now. Yeah, I decided after looking at the box art, this guy, they had it done at the same gold. And so when I decided to do kind of the greenish, steel, that seafoam green steel that I've done on the insert panels, I was going to do the inside as like red lacquered leather, but it didn't look like that's what it's supposed to be. So I changed my mind. So we're going back and doing these gold after the fact, basically. Had I thought about the shoulder pads being gold initially or made that decision, I wouldn't have painted the gold until after I painted all the silver anyway. Because like I said, this is on top of the silver in this case. So paint the silver first, do the gold separate. But you're watching me kind of do it backwards here because I already painted the gold. I'm going to go repeat. Luckily, it's only been a couple days, so I still remember the colors I used. They're still out on my palette. Otherwise, I'd be screwed. Okra, and you're still practicing non-metallic metal? Good. Cannot get yourself to the stage where it kind of clicks over to looking like metal. It's that jump, right? And I know it. I always make it sound so simple. It's that jump, that spot where you go from mid-tone colors to bright colors, and making the jump where you stop using those transitional colors that we're used to using in painting. 100% where everybody gets lost in what we call reflective surface painting, which includes metals, glass, shiny plastic, shiny leather, whatever, is that you sell the effect by skipping a handful of colors that you would normally use in everything else, right? If I were just painting yellow armor, I would go to an orangey yellow after this. I wouldn't go straight to yellow ochre, right? Because like anything that we do, we want to have the blends happen both because the transition of color is smooth and your brushstroke is smooth. So there's two things at play there in general, right? You're not gonna blend white with black very easily unless you wet blend them and get the gray that goes in between them. So it's about that color in the middle as well as how you feather the colors into one another. And so with metallic, non-metallic metals, shiny surfaces, reflective surfaces, like we talk about, it's that jump that makes the difference. When you get to where you've done those colors and you've got them blending pretty well, and then when you want to make that jump, you have to stop about at your mid-tone, and then you got to go to white. Not white, but whatever your white is. Like in our case, it's, bright pale yellow on these. So when do you put bright pale yellow on here? If I do it right now, it'll be too garish and it'll look like a racing stripe on a sports suit. So you got to pick that right time. Like if you're quote unquote white is bright pale yellow, then I need to move all of my colors into some sort of a yellow first, and then jump into bright pale yellow as that shine spot, and then I get the darkness, those reflective areas for the environment, come out of that yellow that was down first. In this case, yellow ochre, right? So I use yellow ochre, a little bright yellow ochre, and then bright pale yellow. Right, and so I'll go yellow ochre, bright yellow ochre, and then I'll hit it with this, and that's that jump. You wouldn't normally make that jump because it's very garish and hard to blend. You would normally mix these two together a couple times and then go to this, right? But with reflective surfaces, you jump straight to this. That's the key. And it's hard to see on something so small because all of this is doesn't really show it off. But if you look at something that has a larger metallic surface on it. Oh, Mashik's way that he worked up the warrior is perfect for that, right? You can see the way he has these dark yellow tones, and then boom, bright pale yellow right over the top of that, right? It just jumps out at you, but that's what gives you that shine, right? Look at the way he's staged. This is the way Mashik, Flame on Miniatures, he painted this at Adepticon, and this is just his setup. His setup is these bands of color that represent the reflection in the environment, the base color of the gold, and then a dark reflection like something in telephone pole in the background, whatever, and then midtones, and it gets a little brighter as you go to your bright spot, but your bright spot overpowers. The more shiny an object is, the more the light reflecting on it in that bright area just overpowers all your color. It takes away the color. It sucks it out. Look at a black, shiny car. Most of it is white, or the color of the light in the environment, the sun. You can tell it's black because you can see the black parts, but in the most shiny parts, it's not black, it's the reflected light, and that's what gives you the shine. So that's what you have to recreate. You have to drop that near white in the midst of all your dark colors, and that's where your brain is tuned out. That's where your brain is like, that's not right, that's not how we paint, that's wrong, bad, don't do it. And until you get used to telling your brain to shut up and do it, you won't have your stuff look like it's reflective, right? You know, he's done the same thing here, where he has like all of these darker downward facing belly panels, and then the ones that face up on the breast line that face more up towards the light are just bright. And then everything else has the darker environmental shading and the natural color of the gold through the yellows here in the belly, where it kind of, you can see that belly panel kind of goes back outward, where all the other ones are slanted in. So these will be darker. So you got to start looking at your geometric shape. Same thing here on this little flower bud style shoulder guard, you know, bright on the upward facing ones, but then it goes immediately a ton darker right next to that bright color. And you would never do that in a normal painting situation because it would look silly. So that's what you got to determine. That's what you got to get used to and good with, right? And then I never know where any of the rest of my stuff is here. Same with like swords, right? We've got the dark and environmental battleground, 40K battleground, you know, darkness, and then the bright shine of a flare going off or an explosion or the sun or whatever that interrupts that darkness that makes it look like metal. Right? A lot of times we spend too much time blending our colors, right? The more you blend the color, the less shiny it is. The more it's like brushed aluminum or stainless steel, you know, brushed stainless steel. There are metals that do that, where you will go from dark to light over a more gradual progression of grays, and like if you're doing silver. And then there's more shine like this, which is a dull shine because it still doesn't have the supreme brightness of black right next to white. But we have that dull gray that gets a little brighter around the reflection, but then it's dark everywhere else. Right? So, and same for the golds and everything else that you paint. You just have to find a way to put that spark of color on there. You'll notice on the golds, they look duller because I go from a gentler, brighter gold into my bright color. So that's more dull, not as shiny as the sword. And that's perfectly fine. Right? You can do it differently based on the different types of metal that you're trying to paint, the different story you have to tell. They're not all going to be the same. If you could just tell your brain to shut up and do it, it'd be great. Yeah. Okran, it's like a curse, right? As soon as you start painting and you really decide, there's a thing inside us as humans. As soon as you get invested in something, no matter what it is, you start paying more attention to it, right? That's just the way it goes. You're invested in your relationship, you start paying more attention to the other person. You know, when you first started dating, maybe you did. Well, that's a bad example because usually when you first started dating, you're paying a lot of attention, right? Because you're peacock feathering and courting a person, so you're doing all the things. But you know, you find these things and you're kind of giving them tertiary glances and everything, and then you get serious about it. You get dug in, and when you get dug in, now it consumes you, and you start thinking about it. You start seeing light differently. And it's funny, as people really start painting and following like the progression of how we tell you to work with color and value, and then they'll come to me and they'll be like, oh my God, when I'm out walking around, I look at bricks and cars and this, and I see how I should paint that thing, not just the thing. And I love that. It's great when you can use your eyes and tune your eyes to the world around you, because you'll be more responsive. You'll be more particular into focusing in on things. Right now, I can see the shine from the studio lighting on one of the hinges on the door leaving the studio. Right, and on the difference between that shiny metal hinge, I wish I could show it to you, and then the dull brown metal or aluminum frame on the door. They're both metal, but they're shining totally different in the exact same light. They're right next to each other, and one is totally different than the other in how it looks. And so that gets my brain like, one's painted, and the paint has an uneven surface on it because they just wiped the paint on the aluminum frame, and the other one is raw metal, and the raw metal is shinier than the painted on thing, even though they're both metal. Right, both light, in the same light and all that. So, is there anything you need to know when moving to a glass palette from using a wet palette? You're tired of dealing with up charges on wet palette paper? Oh yeah, Chris. Not. I mean, in both cases, the big key that I tell people, you'll see my palette here, right? So I'm using a piece of paper, palette paper. Right. I should just move the camera over here. So if I get rid of the zoom, I think we're zoomed, right? Turn that off, and then I can do this, right? So on my palette paper, the big thing that I tell people is that there's a common mistake that's made in miniature painting for some reason, where I see people do this. I'll just take my pool of burnt sienna that's up here, right? So a lot of people will take, and when they use their paint, they do this. They spread it all over the place to get it on their brush, right? And now you've got this big wide. I took a whole droplet of paint and I spread it all over the place. You're used to doing this on your wet palette maybe, or dry palette. And now I've got good paint on my brush and I go paint. And by the time I come back, that's useless. Because you've spread it so thin and there's so much air surface area that air can touch the paint that it'll evaporate almost instantaneously. It won't last very long. Keep your paint in a droplet, right? So I'll take some more burnt sienna, right? You can still see it here. Right, so I'll put a droplet of burnt sienna out, and I can make this. And I'm in Arizona. Our studio here in Phoenix, is not the most friendly to water-based paints because everything dries up in a heartbeat here. But you'll see me paint for hours on stream with the same droplet of paint. I don't ever have to put more paint out unless I sit here and talk to you for an hour instead of painting, and my paint doesn't get used and it dries up. But by just taking a damp brush, right, because I just paint with my brush a little bit wet, you'll come over here and you'll see that I'll pull a tail of color out and I'll work with that color down here. So, right, so I'll just touch the droplet on the side, pull it out down here and thin it out and use that. Now I've got a very thin paint because I had a lot of water on my brush, and I can then use that as like a glaze, right? So now I've got a very thin layer of that. Or if I need thick, I can just come right over here and grab a lot of that, and then I got a more opaque paint, and I can blend those together as I need. So I always have the droplet available as the paint came out of the bottle. That's the most flexible that it is, and I can change it however I want by continuing to pull more streaks of it out that are kind of medium thin, super thin, not thin at all, and I get to make that decision. Don't ever wipe your paint out into a big splotch like this, because it will dry instantly. Like, this paint's not even usable anymore, really, right? I can't even get that to liven up much because we just spread it out and it will dry super fast. Whereas like this orange we've been using is still usable down here because I kept it in a droplet. So that's the biggest thing. Doesn't matter what palette you're using. That's the way you need to be thinking about your painting. Pull the paint that you need right now away from the droplet and use it, right? Because then you got all of that pull to be on the model, but the droplet's still ready to go. So if you need more water, don't put water in the droplet. Use the water on your brush to pull a tail of paint out and have it be watered down to glaze and mix and blend with as you need. Your droplet is still right out of the bottle and can be used however you need to. Okay. And glass, that's what's underneath this is my shame. That's my glass palette that has not been cleaned in 50 million years. I need to scrape all that paint off of there, but I normally use a glass palette. But yeah, those types of things are invaluable. It's just the way paint works, I get people that come to the from a standard art world using paste acrylics, and paste acrylics you can spread out a little bit thinner because there's less water content in them and less evaporation that's occurring until you spread it super thin on the palette or on the canvas, and so you can get away with a little bit more. It's thicker, more resistant to that drying up real quick. But paste paints will skin over, so you'll pop the skin and get to the creamy center all the time. That's what you deal with as a painter using heavy bodied acrylics. So, it all has its nuance. All right, now we're on to yellow ochre. You can see how I've set up my orange to give me that shine. It's a little darker in the front, brighter on the top of the shoulder, because I'm using my light coming from like this direction right here. Yeah, parchment paper can work really well if you want to continue using your wet palette, and you can just go buy a roll of parchment paper from the grocery store, and it'll work just as well, and it's super cheap. You don't have to buy factory sponsored palette paper. It doesn't matter. A wet palette can be a great tool. It can also be a big detriment. So I'm going to get rid of the palette if you don't mind, so I can do the punch in again. You'll see me take the paint off on my thumb each time before I go to the model. Some of you may be unfamiliar with that if you're new here. I use my thumb as a way to wick the paint off of the brush, so that when I go to the model, I don't get a big droplet of paint touching the surface and then having to figure out what to do with that wet paint. I just want the paint to stick exactly where I put the brush. And so I get rid of all the over flooded paint on my thumb palette. And the brush, when I touch, is more like a ballpoint pen at that point, right? I guess is a great way to say it, is that the paint just goes and I can draw like I would with a pencil. The paint on there, I'm never fighting a droplet of paint around the model. Yeah, basic swing. Yeah, swing and swift. Awesome. Yeah, you know, the right, we always talk around here, and I hope that's evident. We are here to help you become more confident in your painting. We manufacture all the paint and brushes you see me using as Monument Hobbies. So while we would love to tell you, you know, buy our stuff, you'll paint like a pro. You know, the reality is you got to start like you're saying. You got to get the right amount of paint in the right place. That's my very simplistic way of telling you to focus when you're just starting out, because the right amount of paint in the right place will guide you all along your journey, because everything you do will require that. Now, it can change what that means, but it really is like paint by numbers. Get the color in the right area on the model, don't let it bleed out onto other things, and control that, and then start working into, okay, now let's learn how to shade and highlight that. Maybe first you do it with contrast paints, maybe then you use washes, maybe then you start with a darker base like I do and then work your highlights up, and so you get the shadow naturally as you paint. You decide what feels comfortable for you as you go. But it's always that brush control and the general knowledge of how painting works that's going to work better than any product you use. Now, that being said, you know, starting out with the cheapest tools on the planet is just going to be an uphill battle for you. So, you know, maybe get, you know, less paint and better paint at first, and learn how to mix or whatever. That's all up to you. But 100% learning how to layer and you know, get your coloring from dark to light, getting that balance, what we call value, to it, so that your dark spots, shadows look dark, bright spots are bright. Focus on that first, because what I'm doing with non-metallic metal, you know, all the fancy terms we use, is really nothing different than painting anything normal. Like I said, you're just making a jump at some point to go brighter than you normally would, to give it that reflective quality. I love yellow ochre. Such a good color. Such a good color. When we first launched the line in 2018, the paints, the one of the big things I said is I will regret not having yellow ochre in the base set. Right? We just didn't have time to hit our release date and get the other colors that we wanted out at the same time, which were all the expansion set 1 colors, dark blue, dark purple, all those colors that I use had to come out later. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to regret this. We didn't, you know, but it was immediately necessary that I was like, okay, expansion set 1 has got to hit the ground soon. These are important colors. Burnt red was in the first one, but I didn't get my burnt yellow, so to speak. Tongue palette. No, don't eat paint. Who activated tutor mode, Jason? Hey, when I'm here by myself, man, that's what you get. That's what you get. I'm going to force you to learn how to do this painting crap if it's the last thing I do. And you'll like it. If I didn't believe in the power of painting and creating the way that I do, there wouldn't be a Pro Acryl. I believe so strongly that you being able to sit down, carry yourself through a painting session and come out the other side just feeling awesome for the time you spent, whether you really nailed it, or whether it was just a good practice session, or if it was just a, hey, I forgot about all the problems at work today, that was awesome. That's super rad. Like, all of that means the world. That's what we try to do here. Let you remember that this is fun. Don't worry about it. Don't judge yourself against the internet critics. Don't let it get too serious unless you're really looking for a career in it, and then only let it get as serious as it needs to be on a growth basis for you. Everything about painting for me is cathartic, I get the joy of doing it like halfway through my busy work day. Maybe I've had a rough work day. I get to come in here and hang out with my friends on the internet, paint some models, have some fun, tell some fart jokes, help somebody become a better painter. Life is good. Now it's starting to look like gold coloring. You can see how it's turning into with just this one pass of the yellow, where it looked like it could be leather. Now with just the one pass of the yellow, you can see how it's going to fit in with all of my other gold now. Right? This yellow layer is the gold color layer that I'm doing. The other two set up the shadows, right? And now we're pretty good, right? This yellow ochre works pretty good like that. I have to start thinking in terms of how I'm going to tune the next bright yellow on there. I still have 2 more colors to go. So I see a couple spots where I need to extend the yellow ochre, so I have a landing zone for more of my next color. So I'm going to bring this bright spot out just just a tad on the shoulder area here. Right, see how it comes to right here? I'm going to move it forward just a little bit. I don't want to overtake all of my orange, but I'm going to give myself another 1/8 of an inch to play with here. Like so. And that's just a very light feathering the color on there to get it to extend a little bit more. Now my next bright color will have more spot because I'm going to move to bright yellow ochre before going to the bright pale yellow. Swing and Swift, right now you're doing color blocking, adding a wash to darken it, then going back over like 75% of it with the original color and the ability to lighter. Perfect. You already know what you're doing, right? That's the best way. When I teach people their first model, it's like, get the color blocking. What we mean, it's the color book, right? You get the right, you get brown on the boots, green on the pants, blue on the shirt, yellow on the hair, skin color on the skin, whatever, right? And it's all one-dimensional color and blocked out. And then a wash gives you some depth to that color, right? If you use a good wash, like our washes, will give some depth to that color and add some shadow back into it. Then you use the exact same colors you just painted the model with to bring that brightness back up, because the wash will filter all of those colors a shade darker. So now your yellow is no longer yellow, it's darker yellow, right? Your brown is no longer the brown you used, it's a darker version of that brown. So the same color you painted with, so you imagine you only need like our base set of colors, 24 colors, paint every model you want, put a wash on it, and then build those colors right back over. And now it looks like you used 3 different colors, because you've got a darker version where the wash is the thickest, a mid-tone version where the wash filters over the base color, and then the base color you used on the highlight. And then you can use edge trim. And you can literally paint like that your whole time painting. You can get so good at that your models look spectacular, and you don't have to really learn anything beyond that. It can be a comfort zone for people that just paint to play, and you get going, boom, you're done. Super easy, super great. You can add dry brushing in there for stuff if you don't want to take the time to do the edge highlighting. Super great. Big fan. So yeah, you're already well on your way. And then it's really just a matter of when you get to a certain point, you're like, this looks great, but I saw a picture on the internet. I want to learn how to do that. Maybe you come here and you see us do something that you're like, I really want to learn how to do that. And then you just take that exact same start that you've been doing and add another step to it. Add another step to it. Maybe eventually you take the wash out of it. I don't use a lot of wash. I do it very specifically, but because I create all that shading as I build from dark colors to light. So I no longer need the wash, but I'm using more colors in my painting process. So maybe you get there. Maybe you decide to continue using the wash. Doesn't matter a lick. There's no right way. Like somebody mentioned before, we call it managing chaos, right? Art is for you to determine what the cool thing you want to do is. How you get there is also very particular to you, right? You may find a particular brush style you like that helps you do your blending, that everybody looks at you and goes, that's not made for what you're doing. Who cares, man? Did it get you there? Then it is technically made for what I'm doing. This is my first highlight. This is my first setting up where my reflection is going to go, is happening with this yellow. I could just dump the bright pale yellow on here, but I want my gold to be a little duller on this. Not too toilet paper roll holder brass with that ultimate shine. I want it to be a little duller, so I'm adding in this other version of yellow to do exactly that. What's your take on getting grades in art class? I mean, grades in any class are about following the rules. What does the instructor tell you to do? So getting grades in art class, I think, is just that. Does it mean your art's bad or good? No, it just means, did you follow the instruction correctly? Is that bad or good? No. Inherently, no. I don't know. I can understand if you're frustrated with the idea of grades in art class. Seems kind of odd. But art class is usually around, in its best form, I believe, is going to be centered around teaching you a concept. Like if I'm teaching you a concept of mixing paint, and color theory or whatever, then there is a right way, or maybe not a right way. There is a plan I can teach you, and there's a right way to follow that plan. Does that make sense? And so I could grade that. I'd be honest with you, and I've told this a lot, and people don't believe it. They say, maybe you think it's me just posturing, but the only class I ever failed in school, I was a straight A kid. God's honest truth. The only class I ever failed was art class. Wouldn't my art teacher love to see me now? Of course, they'd probably be like Masters brush soap and tell us that what we do isn't really art, but, that's neither here nor there. So yeah, I didn't follow instructions with art very well, because every time they would tell me to draw a horse or do the thing, I always saw the thing with my own mental, inside eye, right? Whatever that is, your mind's eye always showed me a picture that wasn't like what the teacher wanted me to paint. Sometimes it was, but generally it wasn't. It wasn't structured, and I was a little chaotic with how I would do it. And they were trying to teach you that if you want to draw a horse, you start with 2 big circles, and then you do a cylinder for the neck, and then you do a triangle for the head, and you do all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, but what if I just draw the horse? And I just draw the horse, right? I would just start with a sketchy horse and I would flesh the horse out, kind of like I paint. It's very similar. My drawing style is, the forefront of how I paint. I'll just kind of sketch it in, and then I'll work the edges like I'm doing right this second, until I get it to look the way I want to. Horses don't have jetpacks. I wasn't doing that kind of stuff. I wasn't like drawing Spider Horse or anything like that. Well, that would have been really bitching, right? Spider Horse, Spider Horse. I'm gonna do some secondary reflections up here in the dark areas to where I can get a little bit of that more metallic feel going. I like it. I do have to stop here at 4. I have an appointment coming up at 4:30, so unfortunately I can't run long. I would love to be able to get the bright pale yellow on today to really drive the final punch of light home, but that'll have to wait till tomorrow's stream. We will be back. Thank you for hanging out with us. I'll go run last ride through comments and see if there's anything I've been missing. But we got a pretty good workup done on like the greenish steel plating. I'll need to highlight that back up when I get finished. And then of course the gold is set up for really good finish line for tomorrow here. I'm liking it. Thank you all for hanging out with me today. I know it has been a little slower around here because I don't have a producer, and Jordan and Jen are in Germany for Spiel in Essen. If you're in Europe and you're going to Spiel, make sure to drop by either the Element Games or the PK Pro booth. Our team is over there hanging out with our distributors, having meetings, and having some fun while I sit down and hold it down. But I definitely appreciate everybody hanging out with me. Skellabee, what's going on? The world, Bud says, the world's a better place with Percroll. Well, thank you, my friend. That is awesome. My whole goal, man, is let's just get us all to have fun painting. That's awesome. If you use my stuff, I'm blessed. It's awesome. We make great products. If you're ever out looking for a color, try a Percroll color. It'll change your world. Great. If you never try our stuff, keep showing up on the show because we'll all paint together and have fun anyway. I don't care. If people ask me, like, why did you comment on that picture that was done with Vallejo paints? I was like, because the model was rad. I'm still a nerd that loves models. I don't care. So, Anakin, you need to pick up burnt sienna and yellow ochre. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Have most of the primary colors from us? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then we do a lot of really good bright pale like mixers and things like that. But our darker colors are really spectacular for midtones and building up, especially when you start getting into that method of painting that we show you all the time. Start dark, but use color rich. Don't paint in grays and all that. Just start with purple as a base tone, right? Like this guy. Here's royal purple, as my base coat for this guy, and the royal purple does a great job of providing a really neat shadow for all of my fur and everything on the model. So, just playing around with color, you'll find that there are colors you wouldn't normally think of that wind up being regular use ones. Yellow ochre is one of those, because it's a yellow, but it's not a yellow the way we think of it. It's not like plastic yellow. But it's powerful as a shadow color for normal yellow. It's fantastic, as you can see, as a base for gold, along with the bright ochre, and the Nova orange is spectacular. We just came out with that color, and I'm loving it. Chris says, also want to shout out Jordan. He helped me color match some paints to slowly move over from all the PA. Awesome. Yeah, Jordan is fantastic. Jordan is our studio painter for those of you that just find us for the first time. He's one of the ones over in Germany right now. Good to see you, Skilla. Skilla B in the house. Painting one-page rules mini for the challenge. Nice, Panic Bomb. Tech Elf is like, I would rather be painting. Me too. Me too. Your son's an art teacher. Prisoner grades are also based on participation, understanding of the concept. Yeah, like I said, it's the getting the process is what grades are based around. I know lots of people that if you think of your grade being based on how well you draw the horse, it'll mess with you, right? Follow the procedure. Your horse may suck and you'll get an A. Right? Because art is not, and from my perspective in the way it was done, is art was never graded by how great your art piece was. It was about your ability to follow process, stick to the program, deliver the final goal. Everybody's final goal is going to look different. Somebody's going to be Picasso and somebody's going to be the 3-year-old that can't draw a stick figure. Who cares? They can both get A's. There's no reason why you can't. Did you follow the process? Good, because that's the part of making you enjoy art. However your skill develops is up to you, honestly. But understanding that process is what allows your skill to develop better. So that's why we focus a lot on brush control. How do you use the brush? How do you thin the paint? How do you use it to move the paint on the model? How do you blend? What do you do with these things? It's not about a product, it's not about if you do this, you'll be great. It's like, get these fundamentals and then have all those tools in your toolbox. And then when you go to open your toolbox and paint, pick the ones that feel right today. Pick the ones that feel good when you use them. I know people that do a fantastic job dry brushing, and that's the way they paint everything they do is with a dry brush and some base coats and things like that, and they love it, and they do a great job with it, and you will get proficient with it, and it will look better and better and better, and nobody can tell you you're wrong. And then you get people that be like, I don't use dry brushing, that's for sissies, and they won't ever use a dry brush, and maybe their delivery is bad, but they can find their own path and use those tools in a way that presents a model that they love at the end. As long as when you paint, at the end of painting, you feel better about the time you spent during the course of your day, win. I don't care what you do. I literally don't care what you do, right? Join our Discord, join our challenges. We don't grade you. Unless, of course, your horses have backpacks or jetpacks, and then we grade you. You'll get an A. 100%. Too distracted to realize I was a southpaw? Yep. Lefty in the house. Using shapes to draw things never computed. Not for me either. I mean, I understand the idea of the shapes as a component of the whole for lighting, but I didn't ever understand it as a way to draw. I mean, some of my humans, when I would do anatomy and especially comic book anatomy, setting up like a fight scene or something like that, as you're drawing, getting the base concepts and geometric process helps a lot to find the right angle for a wrist or something. You got to know the anatomy to make it work, but you could draw like a tetrahedron or whatever for the palm, and then cylinders for fingers, and circles for head, and a triangle for the chin. That stuff I could set up as a sketch, but I never really did it as part of a larger process. Like a horse is these circles with a cylinder and the triangle. It was never the way I thought about drawing a horse. I would rather draw the horse from the get-go, but sometimes there was a motion to it that I wasn't sure about. Like, how does a horse look when it's like jumping off a cliff? Maybe I don't know. So I get a reference pick, and then maybe I do some geometrics so I can kind of get it, because I don't want to invest in the time it takes to draw the form and then erase it. So the geometrics would help you get like, okay, that's it, I got it. And then you spend the time on it. That clicked, right? But the rest of it didn't, right? Why would you waste time not drawing a horse when the task is to draw the horse? Exactly. Well, it was because most of those people in art class aren't artists, right? None of us were. First art class you walked into, maybe you've been drawing your whole life, but you walk in there and they have to treat it from the baseline of who hasn't drawn a horse. How do you develop a horse from the idea of I need to draw a horse, but I don't know what a horse looks like? I do. If I show me a horse, I know that's a horse, but your hand and your brain don't know how to turn your idea into something on paper. So that's tough. You've distracted him long enough to keep going. I know, you got me 11 minutes longer now. Wish you could go to Spiel Essen. Oh, I know, right? There's all sorts of crazy games and board games and TCGs that go there. It's like a whole huge deal. Sarcastic Grandpa, thank you again for tuning in. Hope we gave you some good info today. Drybrush King Anakin, good. Yeah, Drybrushing does some amazing things. Right? You watch Byron from Artis Opus, and he does amazing things with a dry brush that, most people be like, I don't use dry brushes. You should. Your horses and dogs look exactly the same. I mean, they are, except for size. Hopefully you don't have a dog that's as big as a horse, but they're the same. Same thing. Same thing. All right, gang, thank you so much. I'm going to drop some links in chat for those of you that may be new here. Please hit that follow button. We stream 5 days a week from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time here in Arizona. I'll give you the store link, which is where you can find all of our Monument Hobbies products, and the FLGS link, because the FLGS link is where you can find the store locator on our site to help you see if there's a store somewhere in your neck of the woods that you can support. They literally do a great job of providing spaces for people to play. You know the drill. You can go paint there, hang out, make new friends, support your local gaming store. Lots of them carry our products. And then last but not least, let's look at the Discord challenge, or the Discord server, because we've got some ridiculous amount of thousands of people on the Discord server, artists just like you and me that are growing along their stage of enjoying this wonderful weird nerddom that we do, and you can share your stories, share your pictures of your models, ask questions, get great inspiration, make friends. It's a great place, so join us over on Discord when you have a chance. I'll be back again tomorrow. It's Friday, last day that you're stuck with me by myself. Well, maybe not. I might be here by myself on Monday too, and we might find somebody around the office to pull in and have some fun tomorrow. We'll see. But I will be back again standard time tomorrow. So hope to see you then. Stick around. We're going to find somebody to raid. Show love in the chat. We wind up, and it's free. Hit the follow button. It helps people out, and I will catch you later. Adios, gang.